Hello everyone and welcome back to my HTML Fundamental for Beginners tutorial. In today's video, we are going to look at HTML, which is the basic language of the web. So think of HTML as the skeleton of every website that you see online. It gives structure to all the text, images, and buttons you see online. So we will start off by taking a look at some very basic things regarding HTML. We'll look at some important tags, then we'll take you through creating your very first web page. By the end, you should have a very solid foundation to work off of and the confidence to go ahead and learn and experiment with more. So if you are new to this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more beginner friendly tutorials in the future. So let's just jump in by looking at some of the very basic requirements that we will need to start writing our HTML. Alright, so one of the very first things you are going to need here is a computer. Okay, so I'm already assuming that if you are watching this video, you are watching it on your personal device or maybe a mobile phone, but then I'll recommend that you do this tutorial on a computer so that you have one of the best practices on your PC. Okay, so the next thing after you've gotten your PC is to download a text editor. Okay, so I'll recommend Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text. Both of these tools, I have a video on this channel where I showed you how to download and install them. Okay, so we will look at how to use Visual Studio Code. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code, but when it comes to text editor, there are a wide variety that you can select from. Okay, so as a beginner, you definitely have to use a number of them and then get familiar and choose the one that you most prefer. Okay, now the last thing I have listed here is internet connection. Okay, so you don't necessarily need internet connection to write HTML or render HTML on your browser, but then most of these tools that I'm talking about, you need internet connection to be able to install them. But then as a student always learning, there's the need to have internet connection so that you can always reference some of the information that you are learning on the internet. Okay, so if you run into a little bit of a problem while you were writing your code, you can quickly check that out on the internet. Okay, so it helps you to kind of just learn by searching out or searching on your problems and then getting solutions from the internet. Okay, so whenever you research and then you get a solution, you don't forget that solution. It's a way to kind of help in your retentive memory for some of the things you will learn. I'm not saying memorize code, but then it does help you grab some of the information that we'll be talking about in this video. Alright, so before we get into our text editor and start writing some code, let's first of all look at what we are going to learn in the tutorial. Okay, so first of all, we will look at the HTML structure and setup. Okay, so this is the section where we are going to look at some of the very key components of HTML. Okay, so we'll define the structure and look at what the very building blocks of HTML mean. Okay, then we'll look at basic HTML elements, that is the tags. Then we'll go through creating a simple web page, and then we'll look at how to embed images, links, and list. Okay, so yes, so at this point, let's just get into that section. So if we look at our HTML structure, okay, so this is the basic HTML structure composed of all the key components that make up our HTML. Okay, so if you spin up a basic HTML application, these are the things that you are going to see right from the start. Okay, and we are going to look at them individually. Okay, so if we look at the doc type, okay, so we have doc type HTML. Okay, so this has no opening and closing tag, it's just doc type HTML. Now this is the declaration that defines the document types and tells the browser what kind of HTML you are writing. Okay, so this is an HTML5 document, so this defines HTML5. Okay, now we have the parent element, which is HTML. Forget of this attribute language that is being passed in as English. That is the foundation, but you realize that this has a opening and closing tag right here. Okay, so it opens and then it closes. All right, and this is the root element of every HTML page. It contains all the other elements. Okay, so if this contains the rest of the HTML elements that make up the page. Okay, now right after our HTML tag, we go to the head of your HTML. Okay, so the head of your HTML contains metadata about the document. So this metadata will be character sets, the document title, links to external sites such as your CSS. Or okay, so if you want to bring in something like Bootstrap CDN, this is where you have it. Okay, so we have your metadata, you have the viewport width, and so for some of these we will get into them later on. But if we look at your metadata, this metadata will specify the character encoding. So if you have a metadata with this UTF-8 which specifies the character encoding used. Okay, so this UTF-8 supports most characters from all languages, so that's why you always have it in most HTML pages. Okay, and now you know, for title, it's like title, this is a common word, but this is an HTML element, so he has an opening and closing tags. Okay, so if you visit the web, any web page at all, you realize that these web pages have titles. Okay, and then this just specifies the title of the web page. Okay, so this is what will appear in your browser tab. All right, now the last part is the body, and as you can see here, it's already been commented as the where your content goes. Okay, so this contains the visible content of the web page. So whatever your users are going to see will be contained in the body. So the entirety of your web page will be written in the body of your HTML. Okay, yes, so that's it for the explanations on the basic HTML templates. And then what we'll do is to just get into basic HTML tags and then continue from there in our text editor. All right, so before we get into writing our very first HTML code, I wanted to take a quick second to show you how to download the text editors that I just showed. Okay, so we had Visual Studio Code, VS Code, and that of Sublime Text. Okay, so I'm currently on the home page of the Sublime text editor. Once you visit your browser and just type in sublimetext.com, you'll be rerouted to this page. So the first search content you will see is the Sublime Text official web page. Okay, so once you navigate there, you first of all will be greeted with this page. And then the good thing about this website is that they automatically detect your operating system, and then you can just proceed with downloading the application that is compatible with your operating system. Okay, but if you visit their navigation bar, this dark top, you will see that there's a download, and once you navigate to the downloads, you have the option of downloading for the operating systems. Okay, so if you want to download for a Mac, you can select to download for a Mac. If you want to download for Windows, you can do that. Okay, so you have these options available to you to choose from. All right, so I'm just going to click on Mac, and once you click on Mac, you realize that your download has started. It's automatic, so thanks for downloading Sublime Text. And if you go into your downloads folder, you see that we have our downloads currently going on. Okay, so I'm not going to download it, so I'll just go ahead and pause this. And then once your download is complete, you go through the installation process. Okay, but then if you want a video on how to set up Sublime Text on your device, I have a video. I will leave a link to that video in the description. You can check out on the channel. Okay, so the next thing we are looking at is downloading Visual Studio Code. Okay, so if you visit code.visualstudio.com, this is the home page of Visual Studio Code. Or even if you just type in visualstudio.com, the first search content that you will see will lead you to this page right here. Okay, so as you can see, again, it detects your operating system, and then you can go ahead and download, or just click on download right beside the search, and then you are redirected to this page where you can select your operating system. Okay, so once you select your operating system, the downloads will automatically begin. So if we click on mark, you will realize that we are on this page where our download has just begun. Okay, so if you check your downloads, the process will just continue as we had in the earlier sections. Okay, so I already have Visual Studio Code on my device, so I'm not going to download it. But then if you need further instructions on how to get this set up, I have a video on the channel. I'll leave a link to that video in the description so that you can check out a full setup of Visual Studio Code on your device. Okay, so yeah, once you have all of these code editors set up, let's just get in and write our very first HTML. All right, so once we are done downloading our text editors, be it Sublime Text or Visual Studio Code, the next thing you are going to do is to just launch that text editor. Okay, so if we launch our text editor, this is Visual Studio Code, the one I'm using right now for the tutorial. Yours could be the Sublime Text that we downloaded, or that of this Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I've been using mine for a while, so that's how come you see that I have some projects on. Okay, so if you want to bring on your folder, the folder that we are going to create our files and start writing our HTML, you can just click on it and then drag and drop. Okay, so with the way we are going to do this, you just create a folder on your desktop and then name it whatever you want to name it. Okay, and that's where we are going to create all of the files that we are going to be running. That's where we are going to create all our HTML files and then run them locally on our browser. Okay, so what we are going to do is to just create a folder on your desktop. So go ahead and create the folder. I already have a folder on my desktop named HTML tutorial. Okay, so if you want to launch it, all you do is, the one common way is to just drag it and drop it onto the editor, and then that folder gets opened on the editor. Okay, so another way is to open with. Okay, so if you are on Windows, you can open with Visual Studio Code. So when you left click, you have the options to open it with Visual Studio Code. Okay, now if it is Sublime Text, that is also available. But for Visual Studio Code, there is this option you can use. So if you select, then you can open with terminal. Okay, so if you are on Windows, you can open that with Git Bash or your PowerShell, and then you can just type in code dot and hit enter. Okay, so in the video where I showed you how to install Visual Studio Code, I taught you how to enable this feature so that you can use that to launch your Visual Studio Code. Okay, so our code is opened, so we have our file open in Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to close this window right here. Okay, so yes, so once you've successfully created a folder in your Visual Studio Code, the next thing is to create our HTML files and then start writing our HTML. Okay, so once we are in our text editor, the next thing we are going to do is to create our HTML files and begin to write HTML. For this section, if you navigate to your folder, okay, so I'm assuming you've opened VS Code in your folder directory that you created on your desktop. It could be named any different from this. I have HTML tutorials, but once there's an icon for you to create a file, so if you click on that, then we will name this file index.html. okay, so this is the common convention with HTML files. Okay, so it's not always necessary to name it index, but then you can name it whatever you want, but then just make sure that you have the extension of .html. Okay, so once that is done, just hit enter, and then you have your file created. Okay, now I'll show you a quick way to render this HTML on your browser. I'll open my browser side by side, but for this section of the video, we are just looking at setting up the HTML page. Okay, so now that we are in our HTML page, you realize that most HTML files are always engulfed with this angle bracket. Okay, so it has an opening and then we have the closing one. Okay, so this is how they are written. Within this angle bracket, that's where you have your HTML elements. Okay, so most HTML, it doesn't matter wherever you see it, they'll be written and then with this angle brackets enclosing the elements. Okay, So yes, for the basic HTML templates, there's a quick way to spin the HTML templates and just go ahead from there. But since this is our very first tutorial, we are going to type it in. Okay, so we have doc type. Okay, so make sure that you are typing this in yourself for the practice. Okay, so we have doc type HTML, and then you just close that. Okay, and then the next thing is your HTML, the parent element of your page. So you just type in the HTML, and then if you want, you can add the attribute language, and then you set that to English. Okay, yeah, so that is, it's not the basis for this tutorial, but then HTML file should be defined with this attribute with the language set to English. Okay, yes, so once you hit or enter, in my case I have automatic completion, so you see that the closing tag has been added. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that, and we'll just type it in ourselves. So it's at, oh come on, so we have HTML, and then we'll just close it just like that. Okay, yes, so now at this point, now we are going to put whatever is within the key components. Okay, so we've typed the very first key component, which is the doc type, and we have typed our HTML, which is the parent, and all of your the other elements of the HTML exist within the HTML's this whole parent element of HTML. Okay, so now we'll type in the head, okay, which contains all the metadata about the document. Okay, so yes, so this is the root element. Your HTML is the root element of all the HTML pages that you will see in the future. All right, so now let's just type in our head. So the head also has an opening and closing tag. Don't worry, I have auto completion, but you can just make sure that you are typing all in. Okay, so in your head section you can have metadata. Okay, you can have metadata for description of your web page. Okay, and then you can set your viewports, and then the initial scales of 1.0 on all of those stuff. Okay, and then the next thing we have in the head section is the title. Okay, so aside the metadata, okay, you also have the title. Now for meta, we can add our meta data with the character encoding, which is our char set of UTF-8. Okay, so you have UTF, and then we have 8, and then you just close this. Okay, close this in there. All right, so you can have this. Okay, and then we have the title. So title, which is the title of your web page. All right, and then the following elements become the body of your HTML page. Okay, but this body element is outside of your header, but it's still within the HTML, but the root directory of your HTML. Okay, so the definition HTML is your root directory. Okay, and then the rest of the elements just fall within. So now we can define our body. So we have body, and then within the body, that is where we can begin to write our HTML. Okay, so let's give this a title, and then we're just going to call it my first HTML tutorial. Okay, we'll call it my first HTML tutorial, and then right here we'll put in the content of our page. All right, so let me show you a quick way to spin up the basic HTML5 template. Okay, so here on Visual Studio Code, there's a quick way to just spin this out, or to just spin the template without having to type everything in. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of this, and then I'm going to type this exclamation. Okay, once you do that, hit on tab, and then voila, you have generated the basic HTML template. And as you can see, this is the base structure that you are going to be writing your code off of. Okay, so you have your doc type, you have your HTML, the root directory, and then you have your header and the body. So let's start off with writing our HTML tags. Okay, so we are going to start from HTML headings. Okay, so HTML offers 6 headers, okay, or 6 levels of headings, and they start from header 1 through header 6. Okay, and the header 1 has the is the largest through header 6, so it's just going to decrease its size through all the way to header 6. Okay, so we'll have header 1 being the largest, and then header 6 being the smallest. Okay, so what we're going to do is just type them in. So we have each one. Okay, and then you can just type in heading 1. Okay, I'm going to just call it heading 1, and I'll open this side by side with my browser so that you can immediately see what this is on a browser. Okay, so if you left click on your file, that's the index html file, you have the option to open up with live server. Okay, that is if you are on Visual Studio Code, but I think then there's an option for Sublime Text to be able to open it. Okay, all right, so even if you don't have this option, you can just come to the browser, open the file where you saved it, and then open it, and you still have it on your browser live. Okay, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open this with live server. So I have the option to open it with live server. If you don't have that in your on your Visual Studio Code, just go to extensions right here and then type in live server. So we have live server, and then just install this extension. Okay, so any of them will work fine, but just go ahead and click on it and then install. All right, so once you are done with that, you should have the option to open with live server. Okay, so if I open it with live server right here, and now I have it on my browser just as it is. Okay, so I'm just going to open them side by side, so while we write, we will get the updates. Let me just move this back. Let me close the live server option, and now whatever we type in, if we save, we should get an update on our browser window. Okay, so if we go into the next one, which is our header 2, just so you see how HTML renders them. So we have our heading 2, and then you see the differences between header 1 and header 2. Okay, and it's just going to be the same way through header 6. Okay, so if we, let's say, shift option, then I'm just going to duplicate it. I'll have header 1. So we have header 1, header 2. This should be h3. We have h3, and we have h4, just so you see h4, h5 here, and then h6. Okay, so we have header 1 through header 6, and this is just forget about the number 2, but just a way to demonstrate that these headers look different. Okay, now note that with CSS you can basically manipulate this to look anyhow you want it. Okay, so you can make this even look like a header 1 through CSS styling. Okay, but in today's video we are just looking at HTML. I'll do a video on CSS soon, so that we look at how to style the elements of your page. Okay, yes, so once we are good with headers, let's look at paragraphs. Okay, so for paragraphs, this will contain the things like text, like basically paragraphs of text. So the way you define a paragraph is a P, and then if I type in lorem 10, we basically will generate a lorem text of 10 words. Okay, so yes, so if you are writing text on your application, this is how you would define the text. Okay, so if you look at any application and then you see some text or it's an article, now there are semantic tags for writing articles and quotes, but then you can write a text in the form of in a paragraph format. Okay, so you have text written in paragraph. So if you want to define a text, you can just do that. Okay, so we have text. If you have lorem, you can even use the whole lorem, and then I think that is it, and then you generate the whole of the lorem ipsum text. Okay, so this is not all of the lorem ipsum text, but then when you use it, then you get some amount of text for paragraphs. Okay, one thing to note is that headers and paragraphs and many more HTML tags or elements are block level. Okay, so when I talk of block level element, a very easy way to define to explain this is when they stack one after the other, just like this. Okay, so once this ends, the next one starts a new line. Okay, but then we also have inline elements. So we realize that because the paragraph is a block level element, you see that the first paragraph takes its own line, and then there's some space, and then we have the next paragraph taking its own line as well. Okay, so if they were inline elements, we have header, and since the page is not complete, we will have header 2 and just in one line like that. Okay, and then we will see more of the elements that are inline as we continue to go along. Okay, yes, so now that we've dealt with paragraphs, let's look at links. Okay, so if you visit a lot of HTML sites or web pages, they will have a link. Okay, so even in their navigation, they will have a link to click and then move to the next page or see other things related to other parts of the page that they want you to see. Okay, so the way you define a link is an anchor tag here, which is a. Okay, so an opening and closing tag. This is a link, and if we type in click here and save, now we have a link here, and look at it, it's just a random text. Now the reason why it looks this way is because we don't have an attribute to the link. Okay, now there's an attribute attached to every link tag, and then this attribute is where this link leads you to. Okay, so if there's no link, you just have an empty link here that goes nowhere, so you just put in a hash, and then if you click on it, you see that now our pointer has changed, and then this link is a clickable link. Okay, so these links come with a default styling with an underline, and then once we get into CSS, we'll look at how to style and get rid of this underline in case you don't need it. Okay, so yeah, that's it for links, and we'll look at images. Okay, so as for images, you've seen a lot of images on web pages. Okay, so now an image will have a source property that takes in a URL, okay, or the path. Okay, so the source property takes in a path to the image, and then it can then fetch that image and display it. Okay, this href also takes in a URL to where that link is directing you to. Okay, so let's say I had another HTML page, and I'm just going to call it main.html. okay, and then I wanted this link here to reroute me to the main.html. okay, so what I'll do is just put in my main.html here. So I'm just going to have /, and then it should go to the main.html and save. And so if I click on it, now we have been rerouted to the main.html, and then that page is currently empty. But to prove that, let's just spin up a basic HTML page and then save. And if we refresh, now we see that our page has a title of document, and if we write anything here in our document, let's just type in we are in the main page and save, and then you see that okay, we have now navigated back to the main page. Okay, so the same way we can have a link here. So we have another link here, and then this link will just lead us back to our home page. Okay, so this link to home page, will put in an attribute, an href attribute, and then we want to return back to our HTML page. Okay, so yeah, so now you can see that now we have a link here, and when we click on this link, we are back to our home page, which is our index.html page. Okay, so yes, so that's how links work. It can get complex based on the use case, and as we continue to go along, we'll use them in a project, and you see how they work. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is how to embed images onto your web page. Okay, so we are embedding that image right beneath our link tag, and the image attribute or the image element comes with a source attribute. Okay, and this source attribute takes in the path to the image that you are trying to upload. This source attribute may take in a link to an external source where you are trying to fetch the image from, or if you have the images folder here, you give a path to that images folder and then that particular image, and then you'll be able to display that image on your web page. Okay, so it will also come with an alt tag, okay, which just contains text that describes that particular image. Okay, so in case that image fails to load, that text will be displayed on your web page. Okay, so this image tag is self-closing. Okay, so it doesn't have a closing tag on it, so we're just going to type in img, and this img will take in a source property. It will take in a source property, and okay, and this source property will contain the path to the particular image that you are trying to display. Okay, it also has an alt property. Okay, and this alt property contains just some text about the image. So right now I'm going to create a folder, and in that folder I'm going to place in my image, and then we can put a path to that image, and then it will get displayed here. Okay, so I'm just going to create a folder called images, and in images I'm going to put in an image to that directory. In my images folder I'm going to place an image inside that particular folder directory, and then I can give a path to this image tag, and then to be able to fetch that from this and displace it. Okay, so I'm going to place an image inside this images folder. Okay, and then we'll put a source to this images folder in our image tag, and then it will be loaded. Okay, so I'm just going to select it, and then we don't have a paste option, so I would suggest that you go back to your tutorial folder, open it, navigate to the images folder, and just paste that image. Okay, so as you can see, I have an image of a happy cone on my desktop, so that's what I'm going to use. And once you are done, it should be available here in your images folder. Okay, so at this point in our image tag, I'm just going to put in the source, which is the path to that image. So I'm going to put in slash images. Okay, and then what we are looking at is this happy cone image. Okay, so as you can see, since we are doing auto reload, we can see that our image automatically appears on our web page. Okay, and then you can just put in your alternative tag, and I'm just going to call this happy cone. Okay, now you need to know that images come with a height and a width property. Okay, so for the purpose of the video, I'm just going to give it a width so that we can see the image. As you can see right now, let me select this, and let me put this, and you realize that our image is currently very large. Okay, so that's how come you are not seeing it on the page. But other than that, our image is displaying correctly. So if you want, you can give your image a width of 90 pixels. I'm just going to select that, so we have 90 pixels, and then save. You see, and then you can also add a height. Okay, so we'll give this a height, and let's give it 90 pixels as well, and let's see how it's. All right, so now this is our image. Okay, now this is what I was talking about when I mentioned inline and block level elements. Okay, so links and images are inline elements, so that's why we don't have the image on the next line, but rather it is on, or it is in line with that link tag. Okay, so images are inline elements, links are inline elements, and then headers and paragraphs are block level elements. Okay, these are not the only block level or inline elements that you ever meet in HTML, but since they came up, I just wanted to let you know that this is how they behave in HTML. Okay, so yeah, that is it for adding images onto your web page. We'll look at how to add lists, just like bullets in Word documents or numbering. So we'll add a list of items onto your web page. You've probably seen them a lot, so we'll look at adding list on the web page. All right, so at this point we are going to talk about lists in HTML. Okay, and they come in two types. We have the ordered list and the unordered list. Okay, so just think of it as in a list of things you want to track the order in which they are, and ones in which you don't really care how they are ordered. Okay, so ordered list will come in a format of 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, and unordered list will just come with a bullet symbol, just showing that they are a list. Okay, But then before we get into list, I want to take some few seconds to show you how to write comments in your HTML. Okay, let me just take a few seconds to show you something. So if we write comments and save, you realize that this comment will be somewhere in our HTML page. Okay, so in our body it will be rendered in the page. Let's see, I don't know where that is. Okay, but then this comment, okay, in order for it to not appear on your page, you have to then comment it out in this format. Okay, and the format is, you first of all have the angle bracket with the exclamation mark and then dash dash, then it automatically completes with this closing angle bracket. Okay, yeah, so if you want to write anything that you don't want to render, even if it is an HTML element, so we have an h1 right here. It won't get rendered as in an element in HTML. Okay, so you just put in the text that you want to put in there. Okay, yeah, so that's how you add comments in your HTML. And now at this point, let's look at our list. And list come in HTML in two formats. Okay, there are two types of list. We have the ordered list and the unordered list. Okay, so I'm just going to type that out. And so we have ordered list and unordered what list. Okay, so we are going to look at a way to define each and every one of them. So for ordered list, the convention is an OL. Okay, and then we have the closing tag. Okay, so if we close this, so for ordered list, we have an OL with a closing tag like that. Okay, now we have the list items, and the list items are LIs. Okay, so for your list items will be referred to as the LIs, and this contains the actual items of the parent, which is the ordered list. Okay, so let's say we wanted to write a list of fruits, so I'm just going to put an h1 here, and this h1 should say list of fruits. I'm assuming you want list of fruits on your page. Okay, now we have list of fruit, and then our list items will contain those list of fruits. Okay, so this ordered list gives you this numbering that we see here. So if we put a list of fruit here, let's just call it mango, and then you see that we have one to be mango. Okay, and then if we, let me just copy that down a bit, and I hope you can see my screen. I'll just take that to talk about this br tag. Okay, this as a line break on your web page. Okay, so just to test, if we come in here and then we put in a br tag, okay, it will automatically add something like a return. So as you can see, then it pushes the rest of the text to the next line. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do at the bottom there, so that it pushes our content up for us to see. So I'm just going to add another one here. All right, and save, and I hope you can see the list items now. Okay, so the first one is a mango, the next can be pow, the second or the third could be orange. Okay, and then I can just get rid of this. Okay, so we have three list items, 1 2 3, and that is how an ordered list is listed. Okay, so it's ordered from 1 through 3. Okay, and then we have them there. All right, now the next set of list is the unordered list. Okay, so we call it unordered list, and then let's write those unordered list. To define unordered list, you have a UL, and this UL will contain the list items again. So this LIs. Okay, so we have the LI, and this LIs will contain the list items that you are about to write. Okay, so for that one, we can just copy the same list items right here, and it will work just the same. Now the only thing is that these are represented in bullet format. Okay, instead of the numbering that we have in ordered list. Okay, Yes, so that is how you write list in HTML. Okay, so the next thing we are going to look at is form input types, forms. Before we get into the forms and input types, I just wanted to take a quick few minutes to push this content to the top, okay, so that we have access to the bottom part of the content. Okay, so this is not a CSS tutorial, so don't worry about what I'm doing right now. So I'm just going to define a style, okay, right here, and then inside that style I'm going to give the whole body of the HTML file, and then I'm giving it a padding of 500 pixels. Okay, and save. um okay, oh, okay, let's give it 50 pixels padding. Okay, no, so this shouldn't be padding all around. Okay, so this should be the padding button. Okay, and this should push the content up a bit. All right, so I'm going to add it to 500 pixels, and then you realize that now we have some space at the bottom to scroll and then do whatever we want. Okay, yes, so now at this point we are going to get into the input types. We are going to look at forms. Okay, and forms in HTML are created using the form element. Okay, so we have something like this form. Okay, and then it has both the opening and the closing tag. Okay, now if we are talking about forms, you've probably seen a number of forms. Contact forms on websites are built using this forms element. Okay, now this forms element always takes in an action, and this action specifies where the form data will be sent to. Okay, so this could be a URL to some backend server that your form will be submitted to. So it takes an action, and then this action attribute contains the URL where your form will be submitted to. Okay, now the next attribute the form also takes is a method. Okay, and this method defines the HTTP method that is used in this case. So this specifies the HTTP method used to send the form data. So it's either a get or a post. Okay, so with normal form inputs that you see on website, it's a post because we are pushing the content of that form to that server. Okay, so you see a form with the action, this action will contain the URL to some form of a backend, and then a method of post. Okay, now if we want to kind of get, that is, retrieve data from that server, we will have a get request here. Okay, and that will be the HTTP method we use. Okay, with HTTP methods, we'll get into them when we get into things like JavaScript, and then we are writing backend. Okay, yes, so we'll look at the HTTP methods in future videos. Okay, now within this form element is where you are going to type in your inputs. Okay, so we have text inputs. That's where we are going to begin with. Now this text inputs, let's just type that. Okay, so inputs comes with labels. Okay, so if we just have an input right here, so this is how you type in an input. If we just have an input, and this input is just an empty box that takes data. Okay, so this input currently does not have any direction to as to what this input does. Okay, so the correct way to do this is this input will have a label. Okay, and this label will contain information on this particular input. So this is for, let's just call it a username label. Okay, and then we can name it username. Okay, so if you are building a login page, you have the individual to give his username, and now you can see that the label and the input are inline. Okay, so these are all inline elements. Okay, and now with this input we have types. Okay, so we have the type of text, and that gives you this particular input a text input. Okay, now depending on the type, it will be formatted very differently. Okay, so now with the type of input, we also have placeholders. Okay, so if you see any input on a web page, you see that there's a text inside the input that directs you as to what this input is about. So you do usually just put in, let's say, first name, so we'll call it first name. First name, so first name, okay, so your username, and then you just have it there as in first name. Okay, so this is how first the placeholders are. So if you are typing in your first name, that placeholder doesn't really appear, and then it's just kind of a way to give you direction. Okay, so the next thing about input is the submit. Okay, so let's look at the submit input. So we've looked at the text input, and now let's look at submit. So we have an input, and this input is with the type of submit, and this submit input just turns into a button. Okay, so if you type in submit, then we have this button here. Okay, by default, this submit button attempts to submit the form to that URL. Okay, and as you can see, our form currently doesn't submit to any URL. So this, once you click on submit, it makes an attempt to submit the form, and then but in this case our form is not submitted to any backend URL. Okay, now as you can see, the it says submit, that's by default. But if you want to change this submit, okay, so you don't want it to be submit, so let's say we want to change the value. So it has an attribute called value, and then you can give it whatever you want. Okay, so you can even call it click me, let's just say so, and then this will be the value that this button takes. Okay, so now we have a username, and then the input type here is a text, and then we have an input with a type of submit, and that gives you a button. Okay, yes, so that is it for like forms input types with a type of what button. Let's look at another input type, which is the input type of password. So we have an input with the type of password. So we have password, and then save, and then this will also take in a placeholder of what password. Okay, let's call it a placeholder, and let's call this password. Okay, with this input type, the character that you type in are hidden by default. Okay, so this works just like every password input that you see on any site. Okay, so once you start typing, they are automatically hidden. Okay, so that's why sometimes they have a button here to click and show password by default. Okay, so for security reasons, I'm going to put a break here. All these are inline elements, so that's how come you see them formatted in that manner. So I'm just going to add another one right here, and then we have our form in this format. Okay, so with our input with the type of password, I'm also going to add a label, and then let's call it password. We have the other kinds of input. Okay, so we have the input type of email, we have a number input type, we have a checkbox input type, and then we have radio input types. Okay, so if we look at the input type of email, okay, so once you define an input type as email, it will have some automatic form validations in it for email. Okay, so if you put an input like this with the type of email, automatically if you type anything that is not email like, and then you want to save, then you get this error right here. So please include an @ in the email address, that blah blah blah. Okay, so this input type of email automatically adds some form validations to your email input. Okay, so you can add a label right here. So let's call it a label, and then you can call it, so this label is for email, and then password. Okay, yes, so you can also add a break to this, and then save. Now you can format this with CSS, where you style the button to look better, but for this particular video, it's an HTML video, so we are not getting into styling forms and the rest of the content. Okay, So there's also the input type of radio. Okay, so if we go into radio, so if we take your input, so let's say input, and then the type here, input with the type of radio here, and save. What the heck are we having here? So we are getting an error from live server. Let's see, let's refresh. Okay, so now we don't have that error anymore. So now what we're going to do is we have the input type of radio, and that automatically gives us this radio checkbox. Okay, so as you can see, once it is checked, it cannot be unchecked. That's kind of the default behavior of the radio input type on your page. Okay, but if we refresh, we realize that it's back to the default point where it has not been clicked. Okay, let's look at another kind of HTML element. Okay, so it's not necessarily an input type, but it's a select. Okay, so usually in forms you have a select option, so where they ask you something like select your country or your gender, you have male, female, and others. Okay, so the way you would define a select element in HTML is to first of all just call it in as it is, select. Okay, and select comes with options. Okay, so this select comes with options, and those options are those that you are going to be selecting. Okay, so usually you can add IDs. Okay, so this, you can have an ID on your form. Okay, now these IDs will be used, or this information will be used when you are handling the form data. Okay, but I'm just going to keep it at select, and this select takes in another HTML element. Okay, and this element is the options element. Okay, and now is this options element that takes in the value of the thing you want to pass in. Okay, so for the select, I'm just going to put in here, let's say an h1. Let's put an h1 here, and let's just put in there select your gender. Okay, and let's just call it select your gender. This is not right. And then on this value, we want to put in the first one. Okay, so we are looking at male, and you can put in here as male as well. Okay, so now the options will be the ones available for you to select. Okay, so if you want multiple options, you can just go ahead and duplicate the code. And so now we have here, we have female. Okay, and then we have female right here, female, and then here the value that we are passing in is other. Okay, and then we have other right here. Okay, so if you save with this select element, you now have options. Okay, so then you can see that now at this point we can select different options. Okay, on this particular HTML element. Okay, now when it comes to input types, and we have a number of them. So just as we did with the radio, you also have the option to do a checkbox. Okay, so I'm just going to update this radio to a checkbox so that you see how that is also formatted. Okay, so now you see that this is turned into a checkbox, and that you can check and uncheck. Okay, so this doesn't really behave like the radio one, while once you select it, you cannot edit. Okay, so yes, so that is it for the input types in HTML. The next thing we are going to look at is semantic tags in HTML. Semantic tags are HTML tags that provide meaning to the content inside them. Okay, so these tags will help search engines and other user devices like screen to understand the structure of the web page better. Okay, so we'll look at some of these semantic tags, and then we'll just explain them. Okay, we will not get into details and write complete sections of code on them. Okay, now the first semantic tag I want to look at is the header. Okay, now you realize that in our HTML page we had a head. okay, but this is a different thing altogether. So this is the header and can be written in the body. So what we saw here as head is written just in your HTML parent, but it's not within your body. Okay, now this is the header semantic tag. This tag is used for introductory content or navigational links or web pages. Okay, now you wouldn't confuse this with the nav semantic tags. So you can have a header, and this will represent the introductory content of your web page. Okay, it can also represent your nav. Okay, so the next semantic tag, I'll just introduce it here, is the nav. Okay, now if you have a nav semantic tag, you can place your navigations link within this nav. Okay, now within this nav, you paste in your list items that contains the nav list of your page. Okay, now when web crawlers are searching through your site, they identify this to contain your navigations. Okay, so that's the purpose of these semantic tags that we have in HTML. Okay, yes. So the next thing we are going to look at is article. Okay, so we have the article semantic tag. So we have article, and articles here define self-contained pieces of content. Okay, this could be blog posts, news articles, or if there's a product descriptions on your web page, you can define them as articles on your web page. Okay, so yes, you realize that I'm not writing it. Okay, the video has already gone a long way, so you can look at these things up. We also have a section. Okay, so HTML semantic tags, we have sections, and sections represent a section of content that is related. Okay, so if you can use this to group related content. Okay, so you have section 1, section 2, and this will be separated or differentiated by the classes that you will give to this individual content. Okay, yes, so that is it for sections. And let me just look at the last semantic tag that I want to look at here before we end the video. We have main. Okay, and the main semantic tag will indicate the main content of the document. Okay, so this content would be unique and central to the page. Okay, so this should contain content directly related to the core subject of the page. Okay, so what is your page about? Okay, you can just define the actual description of your page in a main tag. Okay, now the truth is most of this can be nested within one another. Okay, so you can have this main tag, and then within this main tag you have sections or articles and headers. Okay, so you define a main. Okay, so this main can wrap around your entire application. Okay, and then you will render whatever is within your page in the order of either their headers, navigations, article, sections. There's even an aside. Okay, but as you continue to explore HTML, you get to understand them, and as we continue to write more programs in HTML, you get to appreciate them. Bringing this video to an end, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and if you want to support the community, please hit the subscribe button, comment in the comment section, let me know how valuable this video was, and then prepare for the next. Okay, yes, so in later videos we'll build a complete web page. Okay, we'll look at CSS, and once we are done looking at CSS, we will start looking at writing complete web pages. Yes, so enjoy your day.